Story 1. My name is Ryan. At 24, I was renting the second floor of a large old Victorian house in the small town of Riverton, Pennsylvania. The landlord told me the entire first floor was under renovation and would stay empty for many months. He lived in another state, so I almost never saw him. The rent was very cheap, which was the main reason I took the place, even though sleeping above a completely dark and empty floor always gave me a strange, uneasy feeling. The first few weeks were completely quiet. I settled into my routine without any problems. Then late one night around 1 a.m., while I was lying in bed scrolling on my phone, I heard a single, heavy footstep directly below me in the first floor living room. A few seconds later came another, then a third. Slow, deliberate steps, like a person carefully walking across the old wooden floorboards. It didn't sound like normal house settling or pipes. It sounded like real human weight. I froze, holding my breath. After 10 minutes of silence, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but it kept happening almost every night. Sometimes just a few steps, sometimes longer walks. One night I clearly heard what sounded like a kitchen cabinet door being opened and then quietly closed. That was when real fear began to set in. I called the landlord. He was annoyed and dismissive, saying old Victorian houses make all kinds of strange noises, and I was probably overreacting. His response made me feel even more isolated. One Friday night I returned home very late, almost 2 a.m. The second I stepped inside my apartment, the air felt wrong, thick, heavy, and threatening. A loud thud came from directly below, like someone bumping into furniture. I panicked, ran back to my car, locked the doors, and called the police. They searched the first floor and found nothing. But over the following days, small disturbing signs appeared. The downstairs door was slightly open when I knew I had closed it tightly. I started smelling cigarette smoke near the side windows at night, even though I don't smoke and neither do my neighbors. Then came the most terrifying night. The footsteps stopped directly under my bedroom. After a long silence, I heard 3 distinct taps on the ceiling right beneath where I was lying. Tap, tap, tap. It felt personal, like someone was standing there looking up at me. I fled to my friend's house immediately. When we searched the first floor together the next day, we found a fresh cigarette butt hidden far back under a kitchen cabinet. The landlord finally admitted that one of the back windows could be forced open from outside. Someone had clearly been sneaking in and living downstairs for who knows how long, possibly listening to my every move. The final night, while packing to move out, I heard a clear human cough from the hallway right below me. I ran out of the house in terror. The police later found pry marks on the window and an old blanket that didn't belong there. I moved out that weekend. To this day, any unexpected sound at night makes me feel sick with fear. Story 2. My name is Jordan. I was 22 years old and living in the upstairs unit of a mother-son duplex in the quiet suburbs of Ashland, Oregon. My older brother Ethan lived downstairs with his own separate entrance. We had a connecting door inside, but mostly kept to our own spaces. When Ethan left for a 2-week vacation to Costa Rica with his fiancée, I suddenly had the entire property to myself. At first it felt great. Total freedom. No one to bother me. The house all to myself. One completely ordinary evening, I came home from work, cooked a simple dinner of chicken and rice, watched some TV, and went to bed around midnight. I was just starting to drift off into sleep when something jolted me awake. Loud, dark, eerie instrumental music was playing from the living room. It had a slow, haunting, almost sinister vibe that I had never heard before. The sound was coming from my Amazon Alexa, sitting on the kitchen counter. I yelled from my bed, "Alexa, stop!" several times, but the device completely ignored me. The music kept playing. Annoyed and still half asleep, I got out of bed, walked down the hallway into the living room and said louder, "Alexa, stop!" Only then did the music finally cut off. I stood there for a moment, staring at the device. I figured it was just a random glitch. Feeling irritated, I unplugged the Alexa completely from the wall outlet, wrapped the cord around it, and went back to bed, confident that would solve the problem. Roughly an hour later, I woke up again, this time with my heart already racing. The same creepy, haunting music was blasting through the house at full volume. I sat up instantly. The Alexa was plugged back in and working perfectly. I clearly remembered unplugging it. I could still feel the motion of pulling the plug out of the socket with my own fingers. There was zero doubt in my mind. A wave of unease washed over me. Then from the pitch-black living room just beyond my hallway, I heard it. A low, quiet, male whisper. "Alexa, play." The music exploded again immediately after the whisper. Pure, ice-cold terror flooded my entire body. My stomach dropped, my hands started shaking, and I felt paralyzed for a few seconds. I had never experienced fear like this before. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "I'm calling 911 right now. Get the fuck out of my house." My voice cracked from panic. I jumped out of bed, locked my bedroom door, and pushed a heavy chair against it for extra security. With trembling hands, I dialed 911 and told the operator that someone was inside my house. When the police finally arrived, they found my front door wide open, the same door I had locked and deadbolted before going to bed. They searched every room upstairs and downstairs thoroughly but found no one. No signs of forced entry except the open front door. The officers were professional, but I could tell they thought I might have imagined parts of it. That night completely broke something inside me. Even after Ethan came back and we installed multiple security cameras around the house, I couldn't sleep peacefully there anymore. The thought that someone had been hiding downstairs the whole time Ethan was away, silently moving around at night and using my own smart speaker to torment me, still gives me chills to this day. Some houses don't just make sounds. Sometimes something inside them is actively listening and playing with you. Story 3. What if you woke up one night and heard the voice of your dead uncle calling your name from the basement? A man who had died years ago. My name is Alex. When I was 7 years old, my entire world collapsed in one tragic night. My parents were driving home late on a snowy highway outside Blackwood, New York, when a large truck lost control on the ice and slammed into their car. My father died on the operating table that same night. My mother survived, but the injuries were devastating. She suffered severe spinal damage, nerve issues in her legs, and a permanent limp that caused her constant pain for the rest of her life. The big old 2-story house on Maple Ridge Road became both our home and a constant reminder of what we had lost. Around the time I turned 10, Mom started dating again. She was away from the house quite often, sometimes staying overnight with her new partner. During those periods, my Uncle Marcus stepped in and practically lived with me. He was tall, warm, always joking, with a deep, comforting voice. He became the father I no longer had. We spent hours playing catch and football in the backyard. He took me fishing at Willow Lake on weekends, taught me how to skip stones, build campfires, fix my bike, and take care of our pets. He made me feel safe and loved in a way I desperately needed after losing my dad. But when Mom remarried when I was 15, everything changed. Uncle Marcus started visiting less and less. By the time I turned 16, he had completely vanished from our lives. Whenever I asked Mom about him, she would get quiet, look sad, and give vague answers like, "He's going through a difficult time," or "Life gets busy, honey." I suspected something was very wrong, but I never pushed her too hard. I knew how much emotional and physical pain she was already carrying every single day. When I turned 18, the house officially became mine. Mom and her husband had bought a new place across town. At first, living alone felt incredibly liberating. I threw parties, had friends crashing over, brought girls home, left the house messy with clothes and dishes everywhere for days. But the big empty house also brought deep, crushing loneliness. Some nights the silence felt heavy and alive, like the walls themselves were watching me. The only living soul who kept me company was Max, my 13-year-old Australian shepherd. He was old, slow, gray around the muzzle, but he still slept pressed tightly against my side every single night. His quiet breathing was the only thing that made the big house feel less empty. One freezing cold January night, with the Christmas tree still up and its lights softly glowing in the living room, I woke up suddenly around 3 a.m. The spot beside me on the bed was cold. Max was gone. I went downstairs calling his name quietly. I found him in the dark kitchen, standing completely rigid at the top of the basement stairs, staring down into total blackness. His body was tense, the fur along his spine raised. He didn't even turn his head when I approached. "Max, what's wrong, boy?" I whispered. His tail gave one weak wag and then froze again. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I turned on the basement light, but the far corners remained dark and shadowy. Everything looked normal, yet the atmosphere felt terribly wrong. I pulled Max away, closed the door, and tried to go back to sleep. But Max wouldn't relax. Every few minutes he lifted his head toward the bedroom door, ears twitching, letting out low, uneasy growls. He was clearly hearing something. That scared me more than anything. After almost 40 minutes of this tension, I couldn't stay in bed anymore. I went downstairs again. Max followed reluctantly and stopped at the basement door, refusing to go further. My heart was pounding. I stood there for a long time before calling out into the darkness. "Is someone there?" Only silence answered at first. I started walking down the old wooden stairs. Each step creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the basement like a warning. Halfway down, where the low ceiling finally opened the view, I heard it clearly. A weak, raspy, exhausted voice coming from the shadows. "Alex!" It was unmistakably Uncle Marcus, the same voice from my childhood, but now broken, pained, and struggling. My heart dropped. I rushed down the rest of the stairs, shouting his name, frantically checking every corner. Behind the old couch, under the workbench, behind boxes. Max stayed at the top, barking desperately. As I approached the laundry room door, I heard a faint shuffling sound inside. Pure terror exploded inside me. I sprinted upstairs, almost falling, slammed the door shut, locked myself in the bedroom with Max, and called my mom with shaking hands, nearly crying. That night, she finally told me the truth. Uncle Marcus had been diagnosed with aggressive cancer and died 4 years earlier. She had hidden it because she couldn't bear to cause me more pain. The police searched the entire house thoroughly, but found nothing. Yet I know what I heard. Max knows it too. That voice still haunts me.